One of the things that you run into when you are inside of a psych ward is you run into a lot of control freaks. Now, one of the interesting ways that this comes into play, game theory wise, is that if you play the game Sorry, a control freak will assume and assess the game of Sorry as if they have complete or partial control over the game itself, or that they can manipulate their interactions with the other players or the pieces or the board. However, the only input that any player has in Sorry, no matter who you are in the game, is when you pop the bubble that runs the randomization of the dice roll. And this follows a predictable probability algorithm over time that as you play more and more, that algorithm gets more and more predictable. So that's why when you play with kids, it can be a little narcissistic due to the developmental age they're at. You will get kids who think that they have complete control over this situation. And in all actuality, it's happening completely independent of any of their input. And even the person who's rolling the dice has very little control over the game itself. So that's one way that game theory comes into play when you're in a psych ward or you're playing with younger kids and you're playing a game. Now, interestingly enough, another thing is dealing with game theory is if you think about the fact that when you're dealing with a control freak in a psych ward and you're playing cards with them or you're playing dominoes or whatever it is, most people really, really get into that who are control freaks and they try to strategize and manipulate the situation. A lot of them will cheat and things like that. Stack the deck, among other things, but mark the cards. But the interesting thing about that is that the person who wins is not the person who wins the game, but the person who wins the larger game, which is the person who is the worker who gets to go home at the end of their shift, whereas you're stuck there in a psych unit, unable to leave. Now, another interesting thought on game theory is the idea that when you play chess, one of the things that's oftentimes left out of chess is the observational vantage point and how that can take into play when playing a game of chess or cards or whatever it might be, whereas observers have the capability to input information. Given that someone breaks the rules or cheats, they observe it. They can also help with that. And so it can be a hidden dimension of someone's cheating scheme when they're playing a game.